from Station and Dragon, as well as the teams in Houston and in Hawthorne for SpaceX and NASA, as the Dragon Grace spacecraft continuing its approach to the International Space Station, carrying Axiom mission for Commander Peggy Whitson, pilot Shubhanshu Shukla of ISRO, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski of ESA,
Dragon
and
SpaceX
Tibor.
Soft capture ring extension complete. Dragon will continue through waypoint 2 without a hold.
Second copy. No hold at waypoint 2 and good rating extension.
Great communications there. They were anticipating a brief hold to make sure everything aligns, but Dragon Grace continuing on what has been so far so good. A great rendezvous with the International Space Station. They will proceed to continue past waypoint 2. And you also heard in the communications with NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers, the station ready for docking. And a great view of the SpaceX Dragon Grace spacecraft making its glacial approach to the International Space Station, and the view from the space station looking up as it approaches the space-facing or Node 2 zenith port of the Harmony module. We are about 4 minutes away from the waypoint 2 arrival, which again they are expecting to move right past through without a hold. That is at the 20-meter mark, and proceed right on into docking, soft capture, and then soft capture ring retraction and hooks to drive. And that capture, about
Dragon
8 minutes
SpaceX
and 47.
on the big loop. Ground is go for approach 2, and approach is now allowed. Reminder, ensure that visors are closed prior to Dragon's departure from the waypoint. Once Dragon is inside the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
Dragon copies, and we have visors down, and we are go for docking as well. And copy on the approach. Inside 2, chop.
SpaceX copies, visors down. SpaceX crew is go for docking.
All great communications there, as the communications from the ground up to the SpaceX Dragon Grace spacecraft, as visors are down on the 4 astronauts inside, as they continue their approach to the International Space Station, now nearly 7 minutes away from that initial contact. Dragon and the International Space Station now making its way over the northernmost territories of North America and Canada, and heading towards the Atlantic Ocean, as we are now 7.5 minutes away from the approximate docking time, as Dragon will move smoothly past waypoint 2, about 20 meters away. And continuing its fine-tuning and approach, you see little plumes coming off the spacecraft. Again, those are those thruster firings continuing to inch and adjust the spacecraft towards the orbiting laboratory. Dragon continuing to get bigger and bigger from the viewpoint of the International Space Station, as waypoint 2 about 90 seconds away, and there it'll be just a mere 20 meters away. And there the spacecraft will focus on aligning its docking system with the docking adapter, and then fly in to make the initial contact and give us what we will call that soft capture, or the soft capture ring will retract. And then the hooks will drive to form the hard mate. And that capture, or that initial contact, coming in about 6 minutes from now. approaching 30 seconds away from waypoint 2 arrival, in which the Dragon spacecraft will be about 20 meters away, just called out 30 meters, so continuing its close in to the International Space Station. Dragon Grace now 25 meters away. Dragon has now reached waypoint 2, 20 meters away from the International Space Station, and will continue its approach to the International Space Station. And there you can see a great view of that zenith port, that space-facing port of the International Space Station's Harmony module. As the Dragon spacecraft right now sitting at waypoint 2, just 20 meters away.
And at station per step 4 and block Bravo, Dragon attitude is as expected.
Houston copies. Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon is on final approach and is go for docking. Monitor per steps 5 and 6 and 1.102.
Station copies, monitoring per steps 5 and 6.
And there you heard it. The final steps relayed up to the crew for final approach and docking have been given as we continue to see Dragon Grace spacecraft close the gap between them and the International Space Station. Now, just before the spacecraft reaches the international docking adapter for that soft capture, you'll hear the call out CHOP, or crew hands off point, which Dragon will continue its journey and make that initial connection, that soft capture, in those final few moments.
Dragon, 10 meters.
10 meters.
Inside 10 meters, a little less now than 30 feet away, is all that separates Dragon Grace from the International Space Station.
Five meters.
5 meters.
meters, chop.
Houston Station, 2 meters, chop.
We have chop.
1 meter.
1 meter. Dragon contact and soft capture complete.
Roger, copy.
Dragon Grace and the Axiom Mission 4 crew have arrived to the International Space Station at 5:31 a.m. Central Time over the North Atlantic as the two orbiting around the Earth, connecting with the soft capture ring, and now we'll begin the ring retraction to bring the two vehicles closer together, and then the 12 hooks, the two sets of 6, will drive to form a hard mate. And there you heard there, the soft capture ring is retracting, and then we'll do so until sensors are indicating it's time for those hooks to drive in place and give us a hard capture and firmly secure Dragon to station. And again, Axiom Mission 4 and its commander Peggy Whitson, pilot Shubhanshu Shukla of ISRO, and mission specialist Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski and Tibor Kapu of ESA and Hunor have arrived to the International Space Station with contact at 5:31 a.m. Central, 6:31 a.m. Eastern, as the two were orbiting over the North Atlantic. The soft capture ring, that initial contact between Dragon Grace and the International Space Station, continuing to retract, and we'll await for the calls that the sensors read that it will be time for those 12 hooks on the Dragon to then begin driving and connecting itself to form a hard mate to the International Space Station.
Ring retraction complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
This is Mission Control Houston, as you are seeing a live view of the recently connected Dragon Grace spacecraft with the Axiom Mission 4 astronauts and Peggy Whitson, Shubhanshu Shukla, Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski, and Tibor Kapu arrive to the International Space Station. Soft capture and contact at 5:31 a.m. Central Time, 6:31 a.m. Eastern, as the two were orbiting above the North Atlantic. And right now, the two mated with that soft capture, the soft capture ring retracting to pull the spacecraft closer to the International Space Station. And once given the go, the ring or the hooks around the Dragon nose cone will drive and connect to form a hard mate. Teams on the ground in both Houston.
Station Houston on the big loop. MCS configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Station copies.
And a great call there. That's the next step in this docking procedure, is the driving of the hooks, the 12 hooks surrounding the nose cone or the nose of the Dragon spacecraft. And we'll monitor those. They'll drive in 2 sets of 6. The first set of 6 right now, they're traveling, and we'll continue to follow along as the docking process continues on. And then after that first set of 6, the second set will drive and connect Dragon to form a hard mate to the International Space Station. And once the docking is complete, NASA astronauts Anne McClain and Nicole Ayers, who have been monitoring from the International Space Station from the cupola of the Dragon's arrival, it'll be Ayers that'll begin the hatch opening or hatch operations. And that'll start by opening up the main hatch on the Node 2 Zenith section of the Harmony module. That's what you see Dragon connected to. And what's separating that module and the Dragon spacecraft is that and continuing to monitor that first set of 6 hooks forming that hard mate. And once the full set of 12, Ayers will continue the docking procedures with the leak checks and then begin making its way into the pressurized mating adapter. That's what you see between the Harmony module and the Dragon spacecraft, and access into there to then what we begin pressurizing the vestibule, that small compartment between the 2 hatches. And that vestibule has been exposed to the vacuum of space prior to Dragon Grace's arrival. So the next step is to carefully reintroduce that air and pressure inside so it matches both that of the station and the Dragon spacecraft. And we just received confirmation that the first set of 6 hooks have driven and closed, and we'll now begin the second set of 6 to continue that hard mate between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station. If you are just joining us, this is Mission Control Houston, where Axiom Mission 4 aboard the Dragon Grace spacecraft have connected to the International Space Station, at 5:31 a.m. Central Time, currently in the process from soft capture to the hard mate to the orbiting laboratory. First set of 6 hooks have closed, and now monitoring that second set of 6, 12 in total, to form that hard mate.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, hard capture complete.
Dragon copies, hard capture complete.
And we just heard confirmation there. All 12 hooks have closed, and that is a hard mate to the Dragon Grace spacecraft and the International Space Station, completing from soft capture to that hard mate. And these So the soft capture ring retraction in progress, and then it'll be on to establishing umbilical connections between the spacecraft and the International Space Station. That'll allow for the transfer of communications and power through those umbilicals. So we're Dragon, you see that upper portion that's mostly black against the vacuum of space, but that's the solar arrays to provide Dragon power. Once those umbilicals are connected, that power will then be provided by the International Space Station, and communications will have that hardline connection with the umbilicals as well. And once those umbilicals have been connected, that'll complete the docking process, and that's when NASA astronauts Ann McClain and Nicole Ayers, namely Ayers, will jump into action and begin the leak checks and hatch opening procedures. And that'll allow the pressurization of the vestibule, the space between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station, to be brought to pressure equal to that of what is inside station and inside the Dragon spacecraft, about 14 psi, what you experience here on Earth as sea level. And then from there, the hatch operations will continue. And the Axiom Mission 4 team will make its way on board the International Space Station with welcome remarks soon to follow. Soft capture ring has now been stowed away, and the umbilicals are in motion again to connect Dragon Grace and the International Space Station, providing that communications, that direct line of communications and power.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, docking sequence complete. Ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connections shortly. You are go to DOF suits per procedure 4.012 and begin post-docking cabin configuration per 4.400 in parallel.
Dragon copies, docking complete, 4.012 and 4.400 are in work. And Grace is happy to be on Harmony.
Grace Station, we are excited to welcome you. Peggy, Shug, Suave, and Tibor, we cannot wait to open the hatch and give you guys a hug. We'll see you soon.
Looking forward to it.
And Axiom 4 from Houston, welcome aboard the International Space Station. It's an honor to have you join our outpost of international cooperation and exploration.
We are honored to be here. Thank you.
Very exciting moment for all those aboard. This is Mission Control Houston, and an exciting moment for all of us here at NASA's Johnson Space Center and the International Space Station flight control rooms, as well as the teams in Axiom Space, also in Houston, and in Hawthorne, California, and SpaceX as Axiom Mission 4, the private astronaut mission with Peggy Whitson, who you just heard talking on the big loop, the single line of communications between all four parties, sharing her excitement as she returns to the International Space Station, bringing up first-time flyers and pilot Shubhanshu Shukla of ISRO and mission specialist Sławosz Uznański-Wiśniewski of ESA and Tibor Kapu of Hunor. Contact between the two, between Dragon Grace and the International Space Station at 5:31 a.m. Central Time. And now that the hooks have connected, all 12 and umbilicals deployed, providing power and communications. Now the team inside the International Space Station, namely Nicole Ayers, is going to start beginning the hatch opening procedures. And now that we're docked, she will secure some hardware and then move right into those operations. And first we'll open the large hatch at the Node 2 Zenith, or the space-facing port side of the Harmony module. And that's what you see, similar to where that NASA logo is. That's the Harmony module that the pressurized mating adapter is jettisoning up into and connecting to the Dragon Grace spacecraft. And then from there, she'll traverse into that pressurized mating adapter and we'll begin pressurizing the vestibule, which is that small space between the hatches on Dragon and the space station. And we have talked about this has been exposed to vacuum prior to docking. And we'll need to fill that space with air to make sure that pressure is equal with the atmospheric pressures on Dragon and the International Space Station. Also putting away some hardware in the process, including the docking across. And Ayers will use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce that air into the vestibule. And flight controllers here in Houston will continue to monitor the pressure and temperature readings inside and verify that everything is A-OK and leak-free before we get ready to open up the hatches. From that capture moment, which again was 5:31 a.m. Central, 6:31 a.m. Eastern over the North Atlantic. It takes roughly about 2 hours to get everything pressurized and checked out before we open up the hatches and welcome in Axiom Mission 4 to the International Space Station.
SpaceX Dragon on the big loop. Com check on the cabin mic.
Peggy, I have you loud and clear on the cabin mic on the big loop. Dragon, SpaceX on Dragon aground. That call on the cabin mic actually came over Dragon aground.
Thanks for the catch. We reconfigured.
This is Mission Control Houston as we continue to follow along the progress of the contact capture and beginning of hatch opening procedures as Axiom Mission 4 has arrived to the International Space Station with contact at 5:31 a.m. Central Time. The soft capture and ring have been retracted and stowed away. The 12 hooks around the nose, the bulkhead there of the Dragon SpaceX connected to the pressurized mating adapter have latched on to create the hard mate. The umbilicals have been extended to allow for Dragon to run on power and communication lines provided by the International Space Station. And now looking at approximately 8:35 a.m. Central Time for welcome remarks, and shortly after the Axiom Mission 4 team make their way through the hatchway and into the International Space Station. The docking procedures between the soft capture ring, the hooks, and umbilicals have been completed.
Station on the big loop. Node 2 overhead hatch is open.
Houston copies.
And a good call there down from NASA astronaut Nicole Ayers saying that she has opened up the hatch for the Node 2 Zenith way, the space-facing side of the Harmony module, to give her access to the pressurized mating adapter. And there she will cruise in to begin work on the hatch opening procedures and pressurizing
Station and
the vestibule.
Dragon Houston on the big loop. We are troubleshooting the big loop audio comm issues from earlier, and the action we're about to take will take down big loop comm between ISS and the Axiom crew for about 5 minutes. We may require additional comm checks after.
Station copies.
Dragon copy.
Communications there on the big loop between the teams here in Houston and up to the International Space Station as they troubleshoot some communications, and the big loop that you have been hearing that have connected everyone here inside of Mission Control Houston and the International Space Station Flight Control Room, those aboard the space station and inside the SpaceX Dragon Grace spacecraft, and the teams in Hawthorne, California, those 4 parties, that's the big loop. They will troubleshoot those communications for about 5 minutes and then recheck. But you heard just prior to that NASA astronauts Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers have begun the hatch opening procedures, in which the large hatch at the Node 2 Zenith, that's the space-facing side of the Harmony module, has been opened, and that will allow for them to begin the hatch opening procedures and pressurize the vestibule, which is what, in addition to the comms checks, we will monitor, as Ayers will use a small valve on the station's hatch to slowly introduce air into the vestibule. That's the gap between the Dragon spacecraft and the International Space Station that has been exposed to vacuum. And from there, they will match the pressure, the atmosphere inside both station and Dragon. And this procedure for a hatch opening usually takes about 2 hours or so to perform leak checks and make sure every connection and everything is safe and sealed.
On the big loop. In step 2.4, the time is 10:56. The APAS equalization valve is back closed.
Houston copies. That's a good config. Expect at least 15 minutes before we continue.
Copies.
And that communication between the International Space Station and the International Space Station Flight Control Room, and you heard the word APAS hatch. That is the hatch, again, that they will be operating and looking to open up from the space station side. But in doing so, they will need to pressurize, as we've been talking about, the vestibule, and then allow for the atmospheres to match between the Dragon Gray spacecraft and Axiom Mission 4 crew. The vestibule itself and the International Space Station all equal throughout to allow for the parties to pass through for the hatch opening and eventual welcome remarks. The contact for Axiom Mission 4 to the International Space Station about a half an hour ago at 5:31 a.m. Central, 6:31 a.m. Eastern. And as they continue to configure the hatch opening procedures for NASA astronaut Ann McClain and Nicole Ayers, between the two of them, we'll continue to work those procedures, and we'll hear those communications throughout in anticipation of Axiom Mission 4 and Commander Peggy Whitson making her return to the International Space Station, her 5th flight, 2nd as a member of Axiom Space and the commander of Axiom Mission 4, and her previous 3 as a NASA astronaut servicing key missions to the International Space Station. And a big part of the coming up in November, 25 years of continuous operations and humans on board the orbiting laboratory. And there she will welcome also first-time flyers and pilot Shubhanshu Shukla of ISRO, Sławomir Uznański-Wiśniewski of ESA, and Tibor Kapu of Hunor for Shukla, Uznański-Wiśniewski, and Kapu representing India, Poland, and Hungary. This will be those nations' first time visiting the orbiting laboratory. And with that, from Axiom Mission 1 through Axiom Mission 4, the International Space Station will have welcomed 14 different private astronaut crew members representing 11 different nations, showing how private astronaut missions truly expand access to the International Space Station for more nations, people, and opportunities. And on your screen, you see the clock counting upwards at the bottom, the T+, that is 1 day, 4 hours, 28 minutes, and now
SpaceX Dragon.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon SpaceX ComCheck on Dragon to ground.
SpaceX Dragon from the cabin mic on Dragon to ground.
Peggy, I'm with you on Dragon to ground.